Mark Bullock, Texas Adventure and Survival School.
Thank you for joining the program here today. Mark Bullock, one of our oil and gas experts, has a side venture that's doing pretty darn well to where we decided to bring him on to let you oil and gas folks. And you know what? You don't even have to be in the oil and gas world to enjoy this, because we're going to talk about survival and the new Texas Adventure and Survival School. Mark Bullock, how are you doing today?
Not too bad, Jason. How are you?
Hey, not too bad. Now, I saw this on LinkedIn, and I thought we got to get you on the program to talk about this because, you know, we've done fishing and hunting and all kinds of, you know, outdoorsy type things because our audience primarily oil and gas, let's be honest, between our radio stations that are in oil and gas communities and our social media and the Crude life, that sort of thing. It's obviously got the oil and gas following. So I thought this would be something right up their alley. And let's talk a little bit about the Texas Adventure and Survival School. Tell me about the school.
So yeah, I recently formed the school primarily because in my spare time I was offering, people were asking me to give survival lessons or bushcraft courses, or just generally instruct them in outdoor activities on how to be safe and, you know, enjoy themselves. Because my background before the oil and gas industry was in the British Army. I'm a certified survival instructor, and it's something that I enjoy with a passion is being outdoors. And I thought, you know, it's coming to a point now where more and more people are asking for it. I'm just going to set up a venture to basically cover that. Because again, there's a lot of courses out there in America. I've been on several myself just to see exactly what they do. And to be quite honest, some courses sadly do fall short of the realistic aims of what survival really is, and you know, it doesn't distinguish between bushcraft and survival because they're two separate entities, and people don't understand that. So that's, you know, why I've, you know, launched the Texas Adventure and Survival School, is to give a new perspective on how things are done and how things should be done.
How much of it is adventure and how much of it is survival, or is the survival part of the adventure?
It's interchangeable. You know, we on the survival side, we run 3 courses: a basic, intermediate, and expert. It's, you know, it's designed to be a progression through the 3 phases. The basic course is 2 days long. It's $175. It's based out of Texas, but we can go to other areas of the United States if there's ample numbers. Obviously, it will be a little bit more than $175. But that basically focuses on teaching the very basic skills for outdoors, such as map reading, in a sense of not only how to look at the map, but how to orientate it to the ground, how to use a compass correctly, how to use that compass to your advantage with a map, how to do something called azimuths or bearings, whichever part of the world you're in, it's the same thing. We then teach, you know, what type of gear to be carrying with you. Again, a lot of people already say, well, I already know that, but when you actually sit down and you look at my equipment compared to theirs, there's a big difference, because I carry one item of one thing, but it's got 75 uses, where I've seen hunters carry 3 items of the same thing that have got the same uses as my one item. You know, and then we then give a basic shelter building lesson and follow on how to cook, how to prepare fires, you know, just general basic stuff. The intermediate course is building upon the skills we've taught in the basic course and refining a few other skills, such as animal trapping, skinning, how to use all parts of the animal for various parts of this, you know, the living process. And then the expert course is a 1-day refresher followed by 4 days in a scenario-based survival setting where you're, in a sense, surviving with what you've got, and you can then see the benefit of your training.
How long are these courses?
Again, as I say, the basic course is 2 days. The intermediate course is 3 days, where the expert course is 5 days. So all in all, it's a 9-day total cycle if you want to do it all in one go.
Okay, and let's say somebody was going to, do this. What would they expect for the first, I guess just the process. They would go online and do this, and
Yep.
and you're having them in Texas, and you're going to other areas, or
Yeah, as I say, we've got a website where they can book the courses on. In fact, our next course is in Huntsville, Texas, over the weekend of the 22nd to the 24th of November. It's a 2-day course which will focus on literally the basics of land navigation or mapping compass, shelter building, fire building, how to set fires, how to control those fires correctly so they don't cause, get out of control. And then we'll also add a few other little things in there for kit and equipment, how to correctly carry that kit and equipment, and stuff like that. That's the basic course.
is this anything that requires people to go and kill their own food to eat it, or do you provide food, or how does that work?
Well, on the basic course, we basically allow them to bring their own food, and then we show them. We give recommendations, and we don't actually allow people to capture and kill and eat their own food until the intermediate phase, because it's not as simple as just going out and setting a trap. There's a lot of mechanisms you have to do in order to get it, because that trap, has to be there for a couple of days. So we tend to set traps on the intermediate course so the animals get used to them, and then by the time the course comes around, they're in full use. So then we send the students out to retrieve their own food, skin it, gut it, quarter it up, and cook it and eat it.
So for those people who probably aren't familiar with the word, bush or bushcraft, what would technically make something bushcraft?
So bushcraft is basically defined as living in the wilderness in a prepared setting, such as in a log cabin off the grid, just generally having skills to live in the woods. That's what bushcraft basically is. It's nothing more than that, where survival is defined as being in an unplanned emergency situation with limited supplies. That's the two differences.
Okay.
But again, we've also expanded upon our offerings. We also offer corporate team building, which involves, let's say you had 50 employees which didn't work as a team. We bring them into our center and give them team building tasks to show them that if they work together as a team, the end result is far more effective and positive than if they didn't work as a team.
Do the corporate, is just for the day, or is that for the weekend, or how does that?
Again, it's one of those ones where if a corporate client was to reach out to us and say, hey, this is what we want, we ask, we basically build a course to their needs.
I see. Okay.
So it can be a day, it can be 2 days, it can be a week. It can be whatever the client wants. Again, we can throw a little bit of survival in there. We can throw a bit of bushcraft in there. Because my background being ex-military, we can also throw a bit of tactical training in there, which again is another good way to work as a team. So like storming a building, or assaulting a building as the correct terminology is, and stuff like that. It's to show people that working as a team is a far more productive process than if you're doing it on your own.
You ever watch any of those survival guys on TV?
I watch some of them.
Or whatever the form of media would be now, online or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
but,
I've seen a wide host, and it's very unprofessional to slate some people. So I tend not to pass comment, because everyone's got their own little way of teaching.
But there's a difference between good information and bad information.
Yes.
because I'll look at like Les Stroud, the Survivor man, and I think what he does is just fine. I think he does a very good job of explaining that, you don't want to ever be like this or do this, but if you are, and he stays calm, which is kind of unusual. Yeah. Whereas like Bear Grylls, on the other hand, I couldn't watch him. I got uncomfortable watching him because I'm like, nobody would do that.
He's a bit intense.
Well, he puts himself in situations that I just don't see most people even doing.
Bear Grylls is more of a, for want of a better word, a combat survivalist scenario. You're in the worst possible situation. You've just been bumped by the enemy. You've lost all your kit and equipment, and pretty much you're out on your own and you're on the run. But what Bear Grylls doesn't show you is once the cameras stop filming, he then goes back to his 5-star hotel room and stays the night.
Right.
And that's genuinely the way it works, where you get some survivalists who genuinely, once the cameras stop rolling, they're still sleeping in the shelters they've built.
Well, that's what I always call Bear Grylls a stunt man with a camera, and a Survivor man. Man, that guy would just he was the crazy guy. He was the guy who was actually crazy enough to go out there and do it. And I'm sure a lot of his stuff, he had some little tricks and things like that, but he was generally pretty transparent, I felt, with it. And I know they have the guy out of Arizona who wears bare feet all the time. He seemed like he was pretty legit. And there's been a few of them, man versus wild or whatever. They've gone through 3 or 4 of them. Do you find that the military way is, I guess, do you have a preference or an opinion when it comes to that old school kind of that Cody and Survivor man, figure out a way to live off the grid or figure out a way to let nature tell you versus military, which has a little bit more organization, a little bit more structure behind it?
Yeah, so I mean, the whole military ethos of survival is genuinely you're in a pretty bad situation to start with. You're in a hostile environment, and everyone's your enemy. And all you've literally got to live off is your team, if you're still with your team, and whatever kit and equipment you're carrying. That's the big difference between, here's a prime example. Every year on the Appalachian Trail, at least 2 people die through mismanagement and not knowing how to survive, which is quite a staggering number when you think about the Appalachian Trail is in a developed country. Opposed to not many people die in the desert because those who are raised in the desert already know desert survival. There's a right way and a wrong way, basically, to do everything in this world, as with everything. And what we're seeing is an influx of TV survivalists who are implanting knowledge into people who are watching this TV show thinking, I can do that. Then going on YouTube, making a couple of videos, getting a bit of a following, and then people go on their courses. And then they're instilled with this half-baked knowledge which they really don't understand. And then when they need to count on it, it genuinely just doesn't work because they've not got the full spectrum of survival. I went on one survival course just to see what it was like, and I asked a question. In an emergency situation, what do I do to signal? And the reply was, we honestly don't know. And this is someone who I've paid to teach me what to do. And they genuinely couldn't tell me the emergency signals in survival, which was pretty piss poor for a survival school.
Well, I would think that, that just shows that they haven't been in that situation probably.
It's not just that. It's, as I say, a lot of people are watching YouTube videos, they're reading articles, they're watching, Naked and Afraid on TV and thinking, I can do that. But they're missing out the very key principles in what we call the immediate action drills of survival. Because, in a survival situation, people say, don't panic. Okay? How do you not panic? It's quite simple. Before you do anything else, you literally stop what you're doing, sit down and rest for 5 minutes. Let your body and your adrenaline come down from the fear that you're feeling. If you smoke, have a cigarette, sip some water. Just don't think about the situation you're in. Calm down for 5 minutes and then start the process of survival. Because if you don't do that, the moment you start making the wrong decisions, you're just doomed to fail.
You mentioned Texas. Are you are you traveling to other places? I'm sure if somebody wants to do some corporate teamwork and they're willing to pay for the travel, you'll go wherever the heck you want. But I mean,
of course, it's the same as the courses. We will offer our courses all over the United States, providing the numbers are there. Which for a course we ask for about between 20 and 25 people. We will then obviously adjust our rates to reflect the travel. We try and do a per person rate outside of Texas for less than $250 a person, which isn't a bad price. But we try and accommodate people who genuinely want to learn anywhere in the United States.
So explain to people maybe why this might be something beneficial for them just outside of a hobby. I'm sure a lot of people look at survival now as hobby because You know, I mean, you don't even have to almost drive. We're almost to driverless cars, man. I mean, we almost don't even have to drive anymore. So people look at survival as, it just happens. Explain to people why this is an actual industry now. Why it's a growing industry. Seriously, it is.
It's a growing industry because there's a school of thought that one day the government's going to fail, and when it does, only the prepared will survive. But survival can be for anything. I mean, you know, there are countless stories where people have done the Appalachian Trail, come off the trail to do something like go to the bathroom or whatever, and have lost their way. 2 years later, someone's out, you know, surveying the area for logging, and they find a body in the bush, literally, because that person got lost and couldn't survive. So it's not just a course for people who think the world's going to end next week. It's a course for anyone that wants to get into hill walking, that wants to get into outdoor sports, or they work in remote locations. There's a famous story where, 15 years ago, a pipeline survey team for the oil and gas industry was working out in the Middle East. They were surveying an area of land that was about 30 miles from a main highway, and as they're driving across the desert, their vehicle breaks down. They write everything down as they were told to, and they come up with the decision that they're going to then leave the vehicle and walk the 30 miles to the highway. For reasons unknown, why they made that decision has never been quite clear. But 72 hours later, the search and rescue team found the vehicle, found the handwritten note that they explained they were walking to the highway. 10 miles from the vehicle, they literally found 3 dead bodies. They had water, they had food. The only thing these guys didn't account for was the heat, and they died from heat exhaustion. So it's, you know, we train people because there's basic survival skills, which is what we focus on, but then there's also specific skills for each environment. So the core teachings are the same, but then when you factor those into, say, like the desert or a mountain region or an Arctic situation, the enhanced skills change to that environment. So you have to know the environment that you're going into in order to prepare for it. So again, we offer all those courses as well.
Of course, me being up in the Dakotas, where it's pretty normal that we might be without power because of cold and that sort of thing. But I would think in California, with the wildfires and the blackouts that they've been having over the last couple of years, these skills are becoming more and more because other states that traditionally maybe didn't have power outages like we have up in North Dakota and South Dakota and Montana and Wyoming and that sort of thing. They're happening more and more. And, you know, I mean, I'm not to get political here or anything, but a lot of it has to do with some of the energy policies that have been put into place. So when you start experiencing more of these power outages, having these survival skills, I mean, I just read an article an hour and a half ago about how in California, a lot of the poor people were having problems because their food went bad. And they didn't, you know, they're on tight budgets, so they just can't go run and get more of it. And anyway, so I could see where these survival skills and just learning a basic overview, I think that would just be beneficial in life.
Yeah, it is. It's, you know, survival is a mixture of old time teachings combined with tried and proven methods of, you know, living outside, basically, you know, in a worst case scenario. And that's basically what we teach. It's, you know, something our ancestors have been doing for hundreds of years or thousands of years, mixed in with a modern day skill set. And that's as simple as what survival is. It's just living, but living to survive, not, you know, I mean, in this modern world where you, as you pointed out, you know, you don't expect people in a developed country to be without power. You just don't expect it. Where when they are, what do? You know, yeah, you can go and have a generator, but if that generator is only going to last you 3 days, how are you then going to preserve your food once that generator stops working? You know, how are you going to then put lights in your house? And it's right. It's just anyone who wants to sit this course. It's, you know, it teaches you how to be self-reliant and survive in an emergency situation.
I would imagine it would do wonders for your self-esteem and your empowerment abilities, and just everything along those lines. You know, like I mentioned, up here in the upper Midwest, a lot of it's because we have so many rural properties that it's not unusual for an ice storm to come through and knock down power lines. And in fact, in the last, I want to say 3 years ago, not even 75 miles south of me, people didn't have power for almost 2 months.
Yeah.
For 2 months. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, and that's the thing. You don't expect that, but it does happen.
I mean,
as I say,
people that live not even an hour and a half away from my house went without power for without 2 months because an ice rain came through, and when the ice rain gets on some of those power lines, they become brittle. And then after the ice rain came through, a snowstorm came through, and then all of a sudden it took 2 months to get the crews down there to fix those power lines and those. But you know what? Those people, they were fine. You know, I mean, it was probably a couple hundred people at the end of the day, so nobody cared. I mean, really, not to be mean, but they weren't rushing down there. It wasn't a state of emergency by any means.
Yeah.
I mean, people cared, but it wasn't certainly top priority. But it didn't need to be because the people had it. You know, they were prepared for things like that. They said, you know, after the first week, it gets a little long in the tooth because you don't expect to be without power for more than a week in the 21st century. And that's a true statement. But anyway, we better wrap up here. We better give yourself a nice plug. Let people know how they can access your website and get your information and just kind of what it is that people expect.
Okay, so people can reach out to us online at www.texadventuresurvival.com. So that's TEXADVENTURVIVAL.com, or they can call us at 281-299-1108, or they can email us at mark@texadventuresurvival.com, or they can reach out on our link. We've got a LinkedIn page, we've got a Facebook page, and we've also got a Twitter account, which is TexasAdventureandSurvival.com.